If you're familiar with the television series Iron Chef and familiar with what music is, you probably have some idea what is behind an event called Iron Composer. Then again, you might know what all those things are and still find it a bit baffling. Iron Composer, presented monthly at Seattle's Crocodile Cafe, pits top Seattle area musicians against one another in a contest of musical mastery. It's going on tonight at 8:30 p.m. at the Crocodile with Chris Ballou of the Presidents of the United States of America going up against Rachel Flotard of Vis Queen. Iron Composer is the brainchild of Mike Min and Korby Sears from the Seattle School, and they join us now. Hello, fellows.
Hello.
Hi.
What is Iron Composer, and how does it work?
This is very difficult to grasp, and it's both fun and frustrating trying to explain this. It's more fun watching people that have seen the show try to explain it. It's kind of a piece in and of itself. But if you know Iron Chef, basically there's two chefs that are competing. They're given one common ingredient, say yams or shrimp, and they have 45 minutes to cook several dishes using that and present it before some celebrity judges. Our take on that is that we do it with songwriting. There is at the beginning of a show, we have an interview with a random audience member. It's for 5 minutes, and the composers are writing down everything that person says, and they have 45 minutes to write a song and then present that at the end of the evening. That's where it follows Iron Chef, but it takes on a myriad of diversions from there. The show's divided into 5 segments of 9 minutes each, which is the songwriting portion, and in each of these rounds, there's a common format. There's something called a turmoil, which is something where we kind of enlist the audience to make it more difficult for the composers to do their work. It's usually something very physical that's thrown their way, or an oral element that makes it more difficult. Imagine trying to write a song at a party, essentially, is what it ends up being. Also,
because just sitting around watching someone put pen to paper would be a little tedious.
When we first started
fascinating.
When we first started this idea, the point was, let's see what other people's creative processes are like. Because Mike and I are composers, and it's kind of like we have our thing. And my way of doing music's pretty boring. It's pretty much the sausage theory in effect. And it's kind of like, what do other people do? And we kind of wanted to put that on display in a voyeuristic way.
But at the same time, we knew that it was going to be boring watching people work. I mean, for cooking shows, you can tell, like for Iron Chef, you could see what they're actually physically doing, but part of actually the comedy in doing Iron Composer is watching people think, and that's actually very interesting if you do it in a time-bound, sort of distracting, swamped sort of way.
Now on Iron Chef, they have the sort of breathless play-by-play guy getting very heat up about how these chefs are working with bass. Do you have that element as well?
We have that too. We have a chief commentator, a guy named Adrien Lafleur, who's a French Cuban dandy. Actually, he's played by an actor called Cliff McClough.
Puerto Rican could be.
Or Puerto Rican, yeah, we don't know. He does make references to Cuba several times. So, and he's sitting at the table with the judges, which they have open mics, and it's always 3 celebrity judges. We've had everyone from, Judy Nicastro, former city council member. We have Tom Douglas this month, which we're shocked that we have. We have a real chef that's doing this month, but there he is.
So they go through this process. They are given distractions. There's a play-by-play, and at the end they emerge with one song each. And do they play this like by themselves?
They do. Now
acoustic guitar. Or what?
Let's keep going with the way the show works.
Sure.
Let's leave Iron Chefs because you have those distractions. Also, we have this thing where they have we call it a sous chef line musician. The composers are not. This is not your typical theater experience where you sit in chairs and you're looking at something up on the stage. It's really in this 360-degree thing where there's a center ring. It's almost like a boxing ring where a lot of action occurs. There's a house band on stage. There's the judges' table all the way at the back, and there's 2 composer stations in the middle of the audience, and it's almost like a rock star petting zoo. I mean, it's part of one of the things of the show is that you can show up and sit right next to Chris Ballou while he writes a song and possibly slap him on the back or whatever.
Yes, you're encouraged to pet them.
Each composer has a sous chef, and the sous chef is a guy that you have to teach your song to, your chords, your lyrics, the whole thing, and then they run up and teach it to the house band. So it's this physical action. There's this person that keeps going between the stage with the house band back to the composers, but the composers do not get direct access to the band. So it's kind of like the telephone game when you're a kid, except it's with music. Imagine me teaching a song to Mike, and then he runs and teaches it to you, and at the end of 45 minutes, then I have to go up and you back me up while I sing the song. So the first time they perform their song is the first time they've ever performed with the house band. So it becomes a game of communication.
So the onus then would probably be on the composer to write a very clear song that could be clearly grasped by the band if they want their vision fulfilled.
That's a strategy that a lot of composers that have a lot of successful, I shouldn't say successful, but people that have ended up winning the
Victorious,
quote-unquote
yes.
competition. That's a strategy that they have employed. I don't necessarily know if that's the best strategy.
I would agree.
We've had people that have done very ambitious takes on composition and trying to write something in 45 minutes and try to present it, and they're just glorious examples of music writing in a competitive fashion, if you have that, I guess.
We're talking with Mike Min and Korby Sears from the Seattle School, who are the people behind Iron Composer. I understand booze is also involved.
The last thing... This is not for the Liquor Control Board. You can turn off the radio right now. The last thing that is a major
The Liquor
element...
Control Board always tunes into this
They
show.
don't
I just
listen
have
to
to tell you
KUOW.
right now.
They know
dial
you're
it in.
Yes, they know that you're
Something
behaving.
is afoot here.
The last thing involved in the show is to explain the actual rules of the show. Is at the beginning of each round, I said there's a similar format. There's these turmoils in each round, but also at the beginning they drink one shot of liquor. So they have 5 shots of liquor, be it whoever's sponsoring the show that month. It could be gin, it could be vodka, it could be whiskey. So it's 5 shots of liquor in 45 minutes, and then they must go up and perform their songs.
The impetus behind all of this, a lot of our pieces when we were doing Seattle School stuff prior to this Iron Composer was theoretically based on trying to figure out ways of writing with inherent intrinsic modes of failure that are kind of like built in. So,
yes.
There's like this big theory that, you want to aim towards a perfect piece or perfecting your oeuvre. Is that the correct pronunciation?
Yes.
Okay, your oeuvre. Anyways, but we found it more interesting if you take certain pieces and through obstacles in a way and trying to actually see in a performance-oriented way, trying to see how people overcome those obstacles. And a lot like the sous chef concept and like the timing concept and the drinking concept. These are all things that are theoretically supposed to make performance of it more interesting, but really just tests of composition and just, I guess, a new way of looking at music in a sense.
Well, it seems like almost emulating of the pitfalls of actually trying to be an artist. Like
Right.
you don't exist in a vacuum. There are distractions. There are people who come through your life.
It's real life, John.
Exactly.
There are 5 shots of liquor, just like in
The joke
real
of the
life.
show is that,
Yes.
I mean, because the other thing that a lot of people that haven't seen the show don't know is that it's a very big theater production. There's characters. Mike plays Chairman Men, who's this fictional guy who...
like the guy with the green pepper. in
Exactly.
Iron
And
Chef.
Mike actually went to West Point, and he wears his West Point whites and a sword, and the whole thing is like Prince Charming, and he's
I am Prince Charming.
He is Prince Charming. And the point of the show is that Mike wants to train these massive songwriters to be these ogres that will roam the earth, just, writing these massive songs that will overtake. And that's kind of funny, but it's also kind of true. I mean, we really are trying to do this. I mean, you're right. I mean, this is what people really face when they're trying to do their careers. And I'm starting to think that people are writing good songs in this series because of all the stuff we're throwing their way, because there's so much chaos. Because at the end of the night, so many people are scared to do this show. It's quite funny. We're actually scaring people in the rock community. I mean, we've become like the only real punk thing left, which is both interesting and,
you're
and,
right.
and
You're
frustrating.
throwing down right there.
Oh, I am.
Throwing
It is
down.
next to a carjacking.
Seattle music community. Come on, bring it.
Next to a carjacking, basically, Iron Composer is the only punk thing left. But at the end of the night, it's fun because you see most of these guys do it grudgingly. They're like, "Oh well, I guess I'll go out there and humiliate myself." And then at the end of the night, they're beaming like children. They had no idea that they could do this in 45 minutes.
It's a newfound skill for them.
It's a newfound skill.
Do you think that where the music that we hear goes through so many stages, where someone writes it and then tries it out in rehearsal and in clubs and then in a studio with a producer and all these tracks, do you think that sucks the life out of music a lot of the time?
Well,
Possibly. I think the other things, I mean, the show kind of focuses on these celebrity composers we get, but 2 roles that are really interesting in the show are the sous chef and the band. We've had people that have done the show and have won as composers, and they came back and want to do the sous chef role because it looks really interesting. Imagine you're basically, one of the side things of the show is that you're seeing well-known rock people write an unreleased song, and that's kind of neat. But the sous chef's an interesting thing because you're really responsible for passing this thing along. And the band, the house band, is an interesting role to bring in because you're seeing a song being born, thrown your way, figuring out, negotiating. This thing really comes down to a communication game. Is really what it is, almost way more than music.
there's definitely
I would say.
filtration and editing that happens that with any creative process. And that's good. We just want to strip it down to pure id at this point. You know, if you have like if you are a songwriter or composer that is stuck in this situation, you really, all you have left is your pure inner child voice rearing its ugly head, and sometimes pretty head. And then we get to see it in all its glory. Sometimes not so.
Well, aside, to back that up, there's one guy named Joe Reinecke who did the very first show, and I think it's fun when we have composers come on and we're forced from the situation and they write something they normally wouldn't do elsewise. Joe did this thing that was kind of this sunny thing with these horn arrangements, and it's not what he typically does. And it's cool that we gave him a situation for a new style to come out that he wouldn't normally do elsewise, and it's just what came out at that time. So that's kind of fun. The other thing is that people that have done the show, actually some of the songs they've written, they've gone on to perform them in their act. I'll actually admit this on air. My favorite song so far is a guy named David Jury of Tennis Pro, who did a song called No Spores, because the interview was with a woman who is a chemical engineer. She was involved with the whole anthrax thing. I think she had handled anthrax 243 times. That's one of the things we got out from her. And David Jury wrote this song about anthrax called No Spores that got people dancing. And that's what I want, is people writing about stuff that hasn't been addressed. Because there's so many things to write about with songs. The most thing we default to is love, relationships, and that's great.
It's great.
I've been in love for 7 years. It's awesome. But there's so many things on this planet, of insects and the space program and oxygen and the way it works. There's so many interesting things out there to write about.
Korby Sears and Mike Min of the Seattle School are the brains and brawn behind Iron Composer, taking place tonight at the Crocodile Cafe. It pits Chris Ballou of the Presidents of the United States of America against Rachel Flotard of Visqueen, both friends of this station. They don't know what song they're going to write yet, but they will find out, and anyone showing up will find out. Tonight at 8:30 at the Crocodile. Korby Sears, Mike Mann, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Don. You rock.
Thank you very much.
You can sign up for weekly email listings of what's coming up on future editions of The Beat on the Beat homepage at KUOW.org, or write to us, thebeat@KUOW.org. More of our daily music now from the Presidents of the United States of America, whose lead singer Chris Ballou is competing in tonight's Iron Composer battle at the Crocodile. This is Shreds of Boa from the album Love Everybody.
They brought their blushing daughter stuffed into a tux. I invited all the guitar heroes. We threw away the guest list and lost $1,000. I